culmination of what I wrote about in Slave Species of God and Slave Species of the Gods. And then the discovery of Adam's calendar, which I called Adam's calendar, that I was introduced to by Johann Heine in 2007. Johann Heine rediscovered this ancient calendar site in about 2003, and he just couldn't get any of the historians, archaeologists, or academics to even come out there and look at the site. They just completely dismissed it offhand. Then I was introduced to it in 2007 and started a path of research and discovery that was just completely mind-boggling and unexpected, that led me to what I believe discovering the links to the Anunnaki presence on Earth. The ancient vanished civilizations of Southern Africa go back to around 300,000 years ago, and pretty much presenting the physical evidence of everything that Zecharia Sitchin has written about and given the world in his life of study and research. So it's really an introduction, I can say, because since Temples of the African Gods, there's been a lot more discovery, and I'm probably going to finish the new book by the end of this year to put all of it in context. But Temples of the African Gods is just about to be re-released with new information and some new chapters under a slightly different title called The African Temples of the Anunnaki. That is being released by Bear and Coena Traditions this month around the world. And it presents huge physical and photographic evidence of this vast vanished civilization and gold mining activity that has been sitting here in Southern Africa for so long, and nobody has paid attention to it. It's quite mind-boggling.
I see. So we'll get to the kind of the nuts and bolts on this. I mean, my main question, I guess, is how long has the human race been on this planet? And if you had to take a wild guess, or maybe you know, how did we get here?
Well, it's all starting to unravel and become very more and more clear on a month-to-month and a year-by-year basis. When people like Eric von Däniken released his Chariots of the Gods, it was a big shock to the system. While some people were very new to that, there were many others who felt a great sense of comfort with that kind of information. It made sense to them. And it's astounding that when Chariots of the Gods was first put out by von Däniken, I think it was in the late 50s or early 60s, he put that information out without any genetic and really deeply scientific support. It was really just common sense and common logic, which we often forget about. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, the chances are pretty good that it must be a duck. So, let's not call it an ostrich, let's stick with a duck. And that's really what I believe we must always remember and compliment Eric von Däniken on, is to be bold and brave, to use common sense and logic to say, listen, everything we've been taught in history is just one set of ideas and theories. But there are many more ideas and theories if you start looking at things from a different perspective. If you accept that we are just part of the great creation, the great divine creation of infinite proportion, and we're just one tiny little speck of that great infinite creation, then there must be a hell of a lot of stuff going on in the universe. And that is obviously the case for those that have gone down this path and studied that. And what we have here in South Africa is really critical to bring us closer to the understanding of our humanness and our humanity, who we are, where we come from, and why we are here. Those three, what I call the great human puzzle, those three questions that so many of us have contemplated, and yet there's so little, there are so few answers that have come from mainstream academia and mainstream history, it all seems to come out of the areas of independent research. And, it's fascinating because I come from a university where I studied and got my degree, and many other researchers like myself come from established educational institutions with the respective degrees and qualifications. While the moment you leave that institution, you're no longer seen as part of that institution or having any kind of credentials to be able to say things. So I find it interesting that for people like myself and many thousands of others who come from these academic institutions, the moment you start putting down your own theories, something that is different to what we are taught in these academic institutions, you're no longer seen as an expert or someone who has the right to give an opinion because you're not part of these institutions. It's crazy. So what we have here is physical and scientific evidence that links with so many different aspects, from geological information and evidence and support. Support and information that we can extract from astronomy and archaeology and astrophysics and geophysics, from mythology and from every other area of science, whether it's science, whether it's physics and or even metaphysics. The important thing is that when you start delving into human history and the origins of humankind, you've got to be prepared and have an open mind to go down channels that you may not be familiar with, or many of us are often not prepared to go down those roads because they just seem too weird and too funky. And unfortunately, that's where it starts to cause problems. And it's really exciting because, the information that we extract from these ancient stone structures, the tools and the artifacts that I've been collecting, the information is so astounding that it starts to give us a very clear understanding that these ancient people had an advanced knowledge of technology, the laws of nature that they applied and used in their technology, and astronomy and the earth and the universe and science and physics and everything that we believe we are very smart about. They had a far superior and infinitely superior knowledge, and left behind all this information encoded in these ancient structures and the tools and artifacts that I've been collecting.
Yeah, if you go by what they teach in schools today, they don't mention any of this. They make it. I mean, I came out of school believing that ancient civilizations were lucky that they were smart enough to be able to hunt their food and eat. And it appears that they were much smarter than that.
Well, exactly. And all we have to do is look at the ancient structures. And I had this discussion with somebody earlier today that arrived at my little museum and has read my books and was just very happy that I was around to have a chat with me. And we're just talking about the incredibly mind-boggling ancient structures, from the Great Pyramids of Giza to the many other structures around the world that boggle the minds of people. And especially in Peru and in South America, some of those ancient and pre-Inca civilizations, the structures there are just spectacular. And Stonehenge is another example. What I find fascinating is that historians and archaeologists and the people that study this in the sort of mainstream, very narrow, conservative approach, keep pointing out the obvious. Here's a structure. It was built by ancient people. Well, everybody can see that there's a structure that was built by ancient people. We can all see that. You're not telling me anything new by telling me that. Now, please tell me how they built this, what your theories are on how they built it and why they built it, and stop applying your current logic that is linked to today's society. Because you cannot use today's logic to explain something that happened from a period before our current understanding of civilization. And that's a problem. We can see these structures standing there, but what our sort of common mainstream media and academia do not tell us is how it was built, why they built it. We keep hearing the same regurgitated nonsense over and over again. Unfortunately, I think people are getting sick and tired of the same stuff. The mystery of Egypt is quite spectacular. And I was in Egypt for the first time this Christmas, this December, on 2012, and on the 20th of December 2012. And it was very interesting because it is not what I had expected. What became very clear to me in Egypt is that what is presented to the world today, this fanfare of ancient civilizations and this might of Egypt, is just it's like a Disney world of deception. That's what I call it. There is a far more sophisticated and a far more ancient civilization in Egypt that we know nothing about, that lies hidden below the sands of everything we see there today. Unfortunately, that is not being excavated, that is not being exposed to the rest of the world. It is consciously and maliciously being left buried, because the moment they start exposing that, they will have to start answering very uncomfortable questions about the origins of humankind, who we are, where we come from, and who the ancient Egyptians really were. And they were not what we are led to believe by popular Egyptologists.
That's fascinating. So then basically the powers that be, they pretty much know what's there, and they don't want us to know, because they don't want us to know where we truly came from, which could very well be have something to do with another star race of some sort.
Yeah, look, all you have to do is look at ancient civilizations and ancient people who had incredible knowledge and incredible wisdom of what we've already mentioned: the laws of nature, the universe, the stars, of advanced knowledge of physics and geophysics and things that we only rediscovering today. They left behind this information for us, encoded in rock carvings. And the reason they did that in rock carvings and in ways that would last for a long time is because they understood that Earth is a vulnerable place, vulnerable to epoch and huge cataclysmic events that wipe out civilizations and wipe out pretty much the whole planet, so that it has to start again, rise from the ashes. The Vedas and many of these ancient cultures talk about the great ages and the great rises and falls of civilizations, the rise and consciousness of the beings that live on this planet, which seem to be linked to the rise and fall of civilizations over extended periods of time, 26,000-year periods, and other periods that are inextricably linked to that. But every single one of these ancient cultures talk about our ancestry coming from the stars. There can be no question and no doubt about that. It is only us at this point in time that keep denying that. So we got to ask ourselves, do we discard the knowledge and the wisdom of the ancients because we think we got cell phones and we got computers and we think we're really smart with our puny technology today that can be blown up in a second with a solar flare? I think we got to be very, very arrogant to do that. Every ancient culture tells us we come from the stars, and we better start believing it and start being comfortable with that. The moment we do that, it starts to explain a lot of the previously inexplicable or misunderstood perceptions of who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And part of the human history, as you said earlier about the human race is not the only group of beings that have existed on this planet. That also becomes clear that there have been other beings infinitely more conscious and more connected to the divine creation, and lesser beings that are infinitely less conscious and more primitive than we are. The Atlanteans are just one such wonderful example of advanced knowledge and technology, but not necessarily, and I'm saying this very carefully, not necessarily very conscious, because I believe it was their lack of consciousness that caused them to probably blow themselves up, as the evidence seems to show. So our human origins seem to be very distinctly linked to this group of beings called the Anunnaki, and it is really this information that Zecharia Sitchin has given the world, and in great detail. And we must forever be grateful to Zecharia Sitchin and take that body of work and keep adding to it. I believe that what I discovered here in South Africa and in Southern Africa, which includes South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique, and even slightly further north into Zambia, but specifically in South Africa and Zimbabwe, we've got this huge concentration of these ancient structures, these circular stone structures that are connected and into giant cities, grids of cities, of circular structures that are more than 10 million of these structures that clearly tell us there's a vanished civilization that used to exist at the southern tip of Africa that we know absolutely nothing about. Everything about these remains is screaming Anunnaki, gold mining, and the creation of the human race as a slave species for the Anunnaki to help them with mining the gold and getting it out of the ground.
Right. Now, I think that one of the problems with people grasping this, at least some people grasping this, is obviously their religious beliefs. And I think that it's really hard for them to grasp that concept, because then they'll ask, well, where does God come into all this? And when you get people like that, and I'm sure you do, what do you tell them?
Well, it's actually really simple. You know, I've been fortunate enough to have Christians, and Jews, and Muslims, and Hindus, and Buddhists, and every religion under the sun come to my presentations. And what I find is that they leave there not affronted or insulted by what I share with them, but actually more enlightened and feeling slightly more connected to what they believe God is. And that brings us to the question. You know, remember that God, the creator of the universe and all things in it, is far greater than any of the man-made religions is trying to explain to us. All the religions we have on this planet are man-made religions. They're of man. They're not of God. The creation is of God and the divine creator of all things. What's really important is to separate what I call God with a big G and gods with a small g. The God with a big G is the divine creator, the creation. Call it what you want. What we need to guard against is confusing the two. And this is where I believe a lot of researchers and theologians and scholars of the Bible and the Quran and especially those two books keep crossing the wires, because unfortunately those two books have been grossly manipulated by human beings and used as a tool of abuse against humanity itself. You know, and God is not a guy with a long beard and white hair sitting on a cloud waiting for humans to screw up so he can punish them.
That's right.
So if you still believe that, you've got some serious problems, and I suggest you go back and start researching this again for yourself. Stop listening to the preachers and start doing your own research. What we'll find is that it's really exciting. And the Bible actually is an incredible document that was hijacked by Constantine, the Roman Emperor Constantine, around 325 AD, when he pretty much hacked the books of the Bible up and created a Bible based on, or a book based on what the Roman Empire needed to control the people. It's got nothing to do with God, the message of the divine creator for humanity. It's got everything to do with the control system by a Roman emperor. And we still use that that book today. However, it is deeply encoded with advanced knowledge and information. But to get that information about the universe and the laws of nature and the laws of God and the beautiful creative sources that hold everything together are encoded in the Bible, but you've got to go below what I call the soap opera that's lying on top. It's a storyline that keeps people engrossed and repeating it like a mantra, but it's really the soap opera that keeps them trapped in the wrong area of information.
That's right.
For example, just the opening line of the Bible that tells us, in the beginning there was nothing, and then the Spirit of God moved across the waters, and then God said, "Let there be light." Just that little first 3 verses of the Bible is so deeply encoded with advanced knowledge of the universe, the creation of the universe, the laws of nature that seem to make up everything that scientists are working with today. It is spectacular. We're discovering that water is deeply connected to creation and to consciousness, and that water surrounds not only solar systems, but is also a signature at the center of galaxies. And if it surrounds solar systems, which are smaller versions of galaxies, there's probably a good chance that water surrounds galaxies as well. And we realize that when it says, the Spirit of God moved across the waters, that there's a lot more to that than first meets the eye. And then we read, God said, "Let there be light." That's not some guy sitting on a cloud that is talking to himself. We are told that it's the sound of the divine Creator that created that is the source behind all the things in creation. A sound, some sort of a sound frequency or a resonance, and that is exactly what we find as you start looking deeper and deeper into this. The source of everything in the universe seems to be some sort of a primordial sound or resonance, or the sound of God, the Word of God, if you want to call it that manifested everything into its physical form, whether it's visible or invisible. And it's spectacular, and that includes light, because it says very clearly that God said, "Let there be light." So first it was the sound of God that then created light in the next step. So it's the combination of the sound and the light that somehow combines and activates what in science would be called the quantum soup of possibility, or in religion it could be called the Holy Spirit, and manifest this physical universe that we then observe. So it is so beautiful, the information that we read and we get, as long as you can start understanding the deeper meanings of what's encoded in those words.
Absolutely. That makes a whole lot of sense, Michael. We've got to take a break here, so hang on with me for a moment, and when we come back, we'll talk some more. I want to hear more about those Anunnaki. So Michael Tellinger is our guest tonight. If you've got a question or a comment, you're more than welcome to call in at 347-989-1012. Okay, we are back. This is Late Night in the Midlands on the LNM Radio Network, and our guest is Michael Tellinger, and well, we're talking about some ancient history here, and we do have Michael linked up over on LateNightInTheMidlands.com. You can go check out his websites, get your hands on his books. Great information, and sometimes, folks, the truth does hurt, but when you look into all the things that Michael's talking about here, like I've said before, you can't deny that there's a lot more to the story than they're telling us, a whole lot more. And like he says, if we would just open our minds and accept the facts as we're getting them, then a lot more would be explained much more easily to us. 347-989-1012 is the number to call in. You can call in using Skype as well. And Michael, we're back, and I guess I want to hear a little bit about the Anunnaki. I mean, how long would you say we were here before the Anunnaki showed up? I mean, how did that whole thing take place, and why did they leave without destroying us?
Well, those are all very important questions. And I think the answers are coming to us on a regular basis now as we start to uncover. The more we learn, the quicker we find more answers and more clues to who the Anunnaki were, what they did. One of the things that is very clear is that the Anunnaki were obsessed with gold. They had and they still have an obsession with gold. And that is clearly inextricably linked to the origins of humankind. It's impossible to separate human history and the origins of humankind from our obsession with gold. But then it gets even more interesting, because the Anunnaki are obviously advanced beings that come from somewhere else, another planet. The Sumerian tablets, according to Zachariah Sitchin, call it this planet of theirs Nibiru, and their main obsession and reason for coming to Earth was gold. And the creation of this new species, which they refer to in the Sumerian tablets as the Lulu Amelu, or primitive worker, is directly linked to the mining of gold. So our presence, the human race presence on Earth, is inextricably linked to gold. But we got to be careful here, because it's not the human obsession with gold, it's the Anunnaki obsession with gold, or the gods with a small g. And we draw the distinction between God with a big G and the gods with a small g. Now, let's also just look at the Bible. The word Elohim, the Hebrew word Elohim in the Bible, people need to be very clear on this. The word for God, Elohim, is a plural. It's the gods. Always has been, always will be. But very, very secretively changed to a singular God. And that is a big mistake. Now, to understand this in greater detail, we need to go to the work of the brilliant Michal Ledwith, who was one of the world's leading theologians and theological scholars, who at one stage was the advisor to both the last two popes at the Vatican, until he realized what the Vatican was all about and got out of there very quickly and started sharing his knowledge and information about what he studied in theology with the rest of the world. Well, Michal Ledwith found out that the first verse of Bible, the original Hebrew version of the Bible, was actually incorrect. In Hebrew, all the sacred texts have to start with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Aleph or Aleph. And the current version of the Bible does not do that. When Michal introduced the first letter of the alphabet, Aleph, to that opening statement, it changes the opening line of the Bible completely. It no longer says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It now states, the Father of the beginnings created the Elohim, the heavens and the earth. I'll say that again. The Father of the beginnings created the Elohim, the heavens and the earth. This is a huge shift in our understanding of what the Bible really is, who God is, and how this all starts to unfold with the deception that's actually that was put into the Bible by especially Constantine, the Roman Emperor Constantine. So you've got to go and do a lot of research to try and get clarity on this stuff. God is a lot larger and far more infinite than most of us could possibly imagine. The moment anybody tries to put God in a box, they are doing you and the rest of humanity a disservice, and they're trying to deceive us. And they've done that very, very successfully for thousands of years. Deceive us about the true nature of who God or what God really is. And replaced an infinite creator with somebody that has human-like features and human-like emotions and human-like reactions, and is filled with vengeance and anger and all those kind of human attributes that are completely and utterly nonsensical and and insane to try and lay at the feet of the divine creator of all things. And it's also, yeah, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I agree. I've said it before that religion was created by man, and it's designed to control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And, there's I must say, the more you study the Bible, the more incredible it becomes as a document of true knowledge. But as I said, you've got to first peel off that soap opera that people keep regurgitating, that's lying on top. If you get stuck and believe verbatim what the words say, words that are written by humans, mostly with the intent to confuse and control, you will get stuck there and become probably quite an unpleasant person because you're confused, and confusion doesn't serve anything. But the moment you allow yourself to be guided by what is written underneath, what is encoded in the information, it becomes very important and very critical to our understanding of the universe and the laws of nature and why we're here. The obsession of gold, of Elohim, or the gods of the Bible, is clear because the Bible itself is filled with hundreds and hundreds of references, if not thousands of references, to gold. In Species of the Gods, I actually give you the number of references to gold in various versions of the Bible. And there are hundreds of versions of the Bible also. Remember, every now and then somebody decides they don't like the current version and they rewrite it. So, the deception is just insane. But the very important reference to gold in Genesis 2 is actually the first place that we can start separating God with a big G from the gods with a small g, or Elohim. And this gets really interesting because it's in Genesis 2, when Adam was still alone on earth, when Eve had not yet been fashioned from his rib. It is not Adam that shows his obsession with gold or raises his obsession with gold. It's actually the Elohim, or the gods, that bring the matter of gold up. Because God is talking to Adam and talking about this land called Havilah, where the land is good, the water is good, and there is gold, God says. So it becomes clear that it wasn't humanity that was obsessed with the gold. It was the gods. Humanity was a consequence of the gods' obsession, and humanity was created so that they can help the gods get the gold out of the ground. And that's as simple as it is. And the evidence of that lies in more than 10 million stone structures left behind by these gods, or the Anunnaki, in South Africa and Zimbabwe, that are directly linked to gold mining beyond your wildest belief. Millions of gold mines. Let me put it this way. I have personal knowledge of at least 75,000 gold mines in Southern Africa. And that's just in one little area around a town called Lydenburg, which was incidentally one of the sort of pioneering gold mining towns in the late 1800s as well.
Well, let's get our picks and go on a little trip.
Yeah. What's spectacular is that there are millions of gold mines, and these stone structures, they were left behind by the Anunnaki in this gold mining empire of the Anunnaki leader called Enki. And Zechariah Sitchin writes great volumes about Enki, who he was, and how he was also actually the inspiration behind the cloning of this new species that he refers to as the Lulu Amelu, or primitive worker. And there's some spectacular translations in Sitchin's work. What I find fascinating, and I'm also very proud of having contributed, is presenting the physical evidence to much of what Zechariah Sitchin has given the world. There can be no more doubt that what he wrote about and his translations were accurate and true. The other important thing is to make it also very clear that the Anunnaki were not interested in the solid metal gold as we know gold today. They were interested in the other form, the monoatomic form of gold, or the white powder of gold. And once again, the Bible is full of this information. When we listen to the preachers, they don't know this stuff. They're not trained to recognize this encoded information. They recognize to promote and proliferate the soap opera, the drama and the punishment and the vengeance and the wars and the conflict. That's what you hear mostly from, the guys that stand on the pedestals every Sunday. Just promote more separation and more hatred among humanity. While if you everybody knows the story of Moses and the golden calf, right? When the Israelites were led out of Egypt by Moses, and they spent 40 years in the desert going around and around. It's a very strange time in human history, and the stories there don't make any sense. Why would people be stuck in a desert for 40 years? It's the size of a large county, really.
Yeah.
And why were they kept there by God, or the Elohim, the gods, on purpose? They were kept there to keep them out of sight and out of mind of other people while they were doing certain things. One of the things that happens is when Moses goes up the mountain to face God and to speak to God, God speaks to him on a mountain. When he comes down, his people have been waiting for him and lost faith. They thought he died and was lost or something. And they built the golden calf. Now, what did they build the golden calf with? They built it with gold that they took from the Egyptians before they left Egypt. Because God told them to go and steal the gold from the Egyptians. Go and take it from the Egyptians, God said to them. So God encouraged the Israelites to go and steal and take what is not theirs. The deception in all of this is so incredible. Clearly, God is not going to tell you to go and steal the gold from the Egyptians. The creator of the universe and all things in it is not obsessed with gold. God created the gold. And so when they built the golden calf, it's from the gold that they took from the Egyptians. They built the golden calf. When Moses came down from the mountain, he saw the golden calf. What did he do? He burnt it in the fire and turned it into white powder. Not into molten gold, into white powder, both in the book of Exodus and in the book of Leviticus. There are two separate explanations of that story, or versions of that story, and at both times Moses turns the golden calf into white powder. You can clearly read, when you read the two versions of the story, that they were written by two different people at different times. The story varies slightly, but in essence what happens is that Moses then takes the white powder and he puts it in the water and he makes the Israelites eat it or drink it. And in there lies a huge amount of knowledge and information about what this white powder of gold actually is. And Lawrence Gardner has done a lot of work into the white powder of gold mystery, or monoatomic gold, before he died, in his various books. And so did David Hudson, who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, who is one of the few people that has actually made and manufactured white powder of gold, monoatomic gold. Now, the way we know gold today is what should be really called diatomic gold, because the atomic number of gold is 79, which means it's got an empty electron or a single electron in its most outer orbit, which means that one atom of gold will want to bind to something else to create a stable orbit of two electrons. And so one gold atom binds to the other gold atom to make a stable molecule or a stable golden state. And that does not have to be so. If you have a single atom of gold, it will bind to anything else. it'll bind to chlorine, and it'll bind to all kinds of things. What David Hudson did is expose us to the rest of the world. He's actually the guy that came up with the term ORMs, or orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, and that's where he actually refers to gold in a orbitally rearranged state, in the monoatomic state, or the white powder of gold. So it's one atom of gold bound to something else that binds with it, and not another atom of gold. That's why it's called monoatomic gold. And this monoatomic gold is actually a white powder. It's not this shiny golden metal structure. It's a white fluffy powder that has no metallic properties at all, but what it does have is very interesting characteristics that completely baffle human understanding. It defies the laws of gravity. It floats. When you put your hand underneath it, the energy in your hand makes it rise up. While when you bring a magnet close to it, it has no effect on this white powder of gold. It is a superconductor. It conducts knowledge and information instantly from one place to the other, without loss of information or the generation of any heat. It gives us an indication of what was most likely in the Ark of the Covenant, which is also incidentally made out of gold, remember? Mm-hmm. And we also told in the Bible, constantly reminded that the Ark of the Covenant never touched the ground. It floated. It always hovered above the ground, and it was carried by 4 people. It is impossible for 4 people to carry something that would have weighed at least 1.5 tons, because, and I'm talking about metric tons in kilograms, because that's more or less what the Ark of the Covenant would have weighed. Anything between 1.5 and 3 tons, wow, if it was made according to the specifications that we read in the Bible, covered in gold. Okay. So there's some fascinating information that just, get beyond the storylines and start reading what is actually given to us, the information in the Bible. And it gives us a much deeper understanding of the universe that we live in, what and who God really is, the force and the source creation behind everything, that brings with it the consciousness that manifests itself in human beings, in the trees and plants and animals, and consciousness that is encoded, that is in everything. It is in rocks, it is in everything around us. Everything in the universe can only exist because of the consciousness that it is imbued with, which I sometimes describe as the breath of God, or the fabric of reality. You'll find that many other researchers probably call it the same thing.
All right, Michael, we've got a couple calls here. If you don't mind, we'll go to the phones.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's get Rascala in Florida. Rascala, welcome aboard.
Hi, Michael and Michael.
Hi.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
Fascinating information that you're giving out tonight. Really appreciate it. It just has my interest completely. So I have a couple of questions for you, if I may.
Go ahead.
In the discussion of when the Anunnaki came here and then created man, and I didn't hear you, so if you said this, I apologize. What were we before they created man? Did you say that? Did you go through that?
No, I didn't go through that. No.
Do we have any idea what it was before it was created as a human?
Well, we've got to go back to the Sumerian translations, because most of the information we have about the Anunnaki and their activities on Earth, we get from the Sumerian translations. And I must also add here that the many detractors that Zecharia Sitchin has, just please go and do some more research. Stop listening and reading the stories of the detractors. There's one, for example, there's some stories that go around that there's no evidence of the Anunnaki in any of the Sumerian translations. There's just such utter nonsense. All you need to do is go to the Oxford University's website, and they've started several years ago, I think about 2006, they started posting translations of Sumerian tablets on the Oxford University's website. There are thousands and thousands of pages of translations of Sumerian tablets with cross-references. It is a spectacular body of work. The only problem with that body of work is it's like reading grade one translation of Shakespearean works with a complete lack of understanding what it is that they're actually reading and making up their own stories as they try and put sense to what Shakespeare was talking about. While Zechariah Sitchin's translations are translations by somebody who actually understands Shakespeare and puts it in a language that it makes sense to the readers. That's the difference. And anyone that's actually tried to teach children how to read will know what I'm talking about. There's constant reference to the Anunnaki on Oxford University's website, except they refer to them as the Annunaki gods. The Annunaki gods. What they don't seem to understand, that the Anunnaki were actually referred to as the gods of heaven and earth. What Sitchin correctly did is call them the Anunnaki, because the An is a reference to heaven and Ki is a reference to earth. So the Annunaki gods are actually the Anunnaki, gods of heaven and earth. So it's these Anunnaki that the Sumerian tablets tell us took an existing creature, and now what that creature was remains a speculation, because we don't know. They took that existing creature and they used its entwined essence. That's what they refer to, that its entwined essence, which I believe to be its DNA. And I also believe that the description they call it in the Sumerian tablets, the entwined essence, is a far infinitely more descriptive, better description as DNA. You know, what the hell is DNA? Deoxyribonucleic acid. It has absolutely no meaning to anyone. Entwined essence has far more understanding of what it truly is, because it is the essence and it is entwined, isn't it?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
No, so what we know is that they took an existing creature. It could have been Homo erectus, could have been Homo habilis, it could have been some other creature, it could have been Bigfoot, it could have been who knows what. There are some references that the creature was wild. It was running wild. It was running wild in the African savannah, and it was hairy, and it was frolicking with the wild animals. It did not know the things that they knew about. It was wild. They took the essence of that creature and they combined it with their own entwined essence, and they used just enough of their own entwined essence to give it enough knowledge and enough ability so that it could follow orders, it could use their tools, and it would not get bored or forget what it was told or instructed to do. So what we get from the Sumerian tablets is they probably gave this creature a larger frontal lobe, which is a sudden appearance in humanity. The Homo sapiens have a much larger frontal lobe than any of the previous Homo creatures. And I believe it was the frontal lobe that actually then ultimately allowed the human being that was created to contemplate its own existence and its own consciousness. So by giving us a frontal lobe so that we could be good slaves that could follow orders and be obedient, in essence actually led to the downfall of the human race being a good obedient slave. And here we are questioning our obedience.
Almost every day. Almost every day. Yeah. So what with your mentioning of the essence, now that was what I was going to follow up with, is they created us in their own image, so we must look like them, right? Do you agree? We were created in their image, so we must look like, or they, yes, we look like them, or they look like us, whichever way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you, but we've got to be careful also here, because there are so many different race groups on planet Earth, and that's also not by accident. That's I believe by design, by the control groups that we have on planet Earth today. Yeah, so in their own image is maybe not looking like them exactly, because there have been many tales and descriptions in the Sumerian tablets themselves.
No, I think it's a generality, right? Just a generality.
It is a generality, yeah. Because, there's descriptions of Enki having white skin and golden hair and
Right.
blue eyes, or
Right.
eyes the color of the sky and hair the color of the sun and light skin. So it tells very clearly that Enki is Anunnaki, in charge of the gold mining empire, was an Aryan type being, while the being that is described in Sitchin's work is described as having the skin of the Anunnaki, having the features, the bodily features of the Anunnaki, and a smooth skin, but it had a browny colored skin. Is referred to as the color of the soil of the Abzu, which is a reddish brown color, right? The Abzu being Africa, southern Africa. So there's some interesting information that we get out of that, yeah.
So another thought that I had about what was happening is, I believe that there's a spiritual side to us. Now, they may have created us, but somewhere along the line, that spiritual side of us is above their ability. Am I right?
I totally agree with you, and I believe that was done consciously. I don't want to go into too much detail here now, but I seem to have, and I was told many, many times, that I have some sort of connection to Enki on a spiritual and conscious level. And it seems to be coming out more and more.
Yeah.
There's also some interesting information in Sitchin's work that suggests that Enki consciously and knowingly gave the creature enough of the essence so that the creature could become conscious, and even more conscious than the Anunnaki themselves. Well, I believe that was what we find in our dormant DNA that becomes activated with time and consciousness. Yeah.
Is it possible that when they made this transition, because I remember in the Bible, there's a place in the Bible that says that we all speak the same language, and now there's no limit to what we can do, right?
That's right. The Tower of Babel incident, yeah.
Right. So it says that God came down and confused everybody, correct?
Yes.
So a bit of confusion that I have is, if we all spoke the same language, which, across the world today, I don't think we all speak the same language, but we do have translators and stuff like that. So what was it? It had to be more than just language that they spoke that gave them the ability. I mean, I've read articles where people believe that they actually built a space launching, a launch pad there. The Tower of Babel was a launch pad. And that's when the Anunnaki got upset and said, wait a minute now, this is getting, we're getting a little too far here. And they came down and confused everybody. So, but they says they confused it by the language. And my confusion in that is, if there was just the language, we have translators now. Why aren't we able to do that now, if that was just the language?
Yeah, look, the Tower of Babel incident is an interesting, is definitely an interesting story, because what it does, it's set at a time when there were already many languages in the world. Our current understanding of when the Tower of Babel was built, there was not only one language in the world. There were already many languages. So it seems to be at the wrong time. If the Tower of Babel incident was actually a real event, historic event, which I have probably no doubt that it was probably a real event. As you said, the humans were so advanced at that stage already that they were starting to imitate the gods and the Anunnaki and doing, building amazing things and creating amazing things. And there was intervention to stop that progress. The way that there's intervention today, there was intervention with Nikola Tesla, gave the world free energy. There was intervention by the elite banking families to stop that advanced technology reaching humanity. So there seems to be this intervention by powerful beings throughout all of human history. because we need to remain the slaves. And the question needs to be asked, why do we need to remain the slaves? Because the obsession with gold continues.
Very true.
People forget that we are mining more gold now than ever before. Well, maybe not when the Anunnaki were doing it in great numbers down here in Southern Africa, but we are mining more gold now than we have in the last 500 years. And where is that gold going? It's certainly not sitting at Fort Knox. It's not sitting in the vault of the Vatican. It's going off this planet. It's, I had a discussion with the CEO of a gold mine here in Johannesburg, Village Gold Reef. It was really interesting. I was on CNBC Africa, waiting to be interviewed with my legal actions against the banks in South Africa, and waiting to be interviewed just after me was the CEO of Village Gold Mining Company, just south of Johannesburg. So I started talking to him about the gold and trying to get as much information from him as I could. And I asked him, what happens to the gold? How do you guys get rid of the gold once you've got it out of the ground? They refine it on the mine, very, very basically, and then they send that refined gold to the Rand refinery, which is in Germiston, Johannesburg, and that gets refined to be pretty much 99%. He told me that once it leaves the mine, they have no idea what happens to the gold. They believe it goes to the Rand refinery, but they can't be sure. And when it reaches the Rand refinery, that's secret. Nobody knows what happens to it from there. So what happens to the gold is a great mystery. It's a great secret. We know that there's gold mining, and everyone knows that the gold mines mining gold, but what happens to the gold remains a mystery. Now, people need to take this very, very seriously and start thinking about this. The gold is not on this planet.
Say that again.
The gold is not on this planet, he says.
The gold was leaving this planet a long time ago. The Anunnaki were taking it off this planet, and that's thousands of years ago. Thousands of years is a long time to us as human beings, but it's a short time and a continuous time for the Anunnaki that have not left this planet. The question is, well, why did they leave? People ask. Well, who said they ever left? They keep this planet under control. They keep it under control under different faces, under different guises, under different systems. The current system that we have in control of this planet, which is the bankers, is an Anunnaki installation. The bankers are just the newly appointed high priests of the Anunnaki, those that are still obsessed with the gold, and the bankers have taken and are more increasingly taking control of the planet so they can carry on mining and exploiting the mineral resources of our planet by enslaving humanity with money and making them work for the Anunnaki. It's a strange and sick system.
Well, then, if what you're saying is accurate, that this would be going on for many thousands of years, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, the systems change. The systems change, but the outcome is the same.
Well, if this has been going on, and I'm not doubting what you're saying, I'm questioning. Okay, this is just part of me. So if this has been going on for thousands of years, how have we not eventually run out of gold? That would mean that, in my mind, logic would tell me that gold would then be an embiotic product of the planet.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. And it's being formed as we speak, and it's probably being pushed up by tectonic movements and other geomagnetic forces and geophysical activity. It's not necessarily static. So it could be formed as we speak. Alchemy is a living part of the creation and the universe as we know it, or as we would like to know it. And alchemy is not a static thing. Alchemy happens in our bodies every millisecond of every day that we're alive. Alchemical reactions take place in our bodies. We are walking chemical laboratories. Our bodies are walking chemical laboratories that perform alchemy all the time. But when people start talking to us about alchemy, it's like, whoa, no, man, that's just mumbo jumbo garbage, you know?
Wow, that was a revelation. That was a revelation to me. I don't know why. Maybe it was naive of me to think, but I thought there would be like a finite amount of gold. I mean, I realized a while back why it's making sense to me now is I realized a while back through Lindsay Williams, I think it is, through some research that he did and articles that I read, that the petroleum, there is no peak oil. That was all a bunch of nonsense so that they could raise the price of oil. That peak oil was in fact being made by, it was abiotic. It was, the planet was making this oil.
It is.
So if that being the case, then this would line right up with that.
Yeah, but you know, there's other important considerations to take in here, and that is that gold is inextricably linked to the consciousness of this planet, and that is a problem because we are yanking the consciousness out of this planet. You know, we shouldn't be mining this planet and abusing its components. We should be using them symbiotically to have a life of abundance in unity and harmony with the planet, not to yank it out and take it off this planet, or yank it out and turn it into something else so that we can use it for 5 seconds and discard it and put it in a rubbish dump in a landfill somewhere. So that's really the problem. So this is all part of the rise of consciousness, the Great Awakening that's happening rapidly. And I think that's going to lead us ultimately to what I'm now more obsessed about than ever before, and that is a world without money, what I call contributionism. Or in Africa we call it Ubuntu. So I'm just finishing my new book now on Ubuntu contributionism, and the only reason I could write this or string these thoughts together is through studying origins of humankind, who we are, where we come from, why we're here, learning from the great works of people like Sitchin and others, and reaching the conclusions that this has been a long journey and a path to enlightenment and to higher consciousness, so that we can go back and start living in harmony with Mother Earth and everything around us. But to do that, we need to first understand our origins and understand who is in control of the planet now. And with that understanding will come shock and awe and dismay and disbelief that we need to overcome. Until we overcome that, we're going to continue being ruled by a small group of elite banking families that are linked to the royal political elite bloodlines that go back thousands of years. You know, the royal bloodlines have been on this planet for thousands of years. It's not something that just rose, out of the ashes a few hundred years ago. And once again, people start thinking about these things that run back thousands of years, and they continue influencing and controlling our world today.
Okay.
And those are, look, one of the most important Sumerian tablets that we have is actually several of them. They're known as the King's Lists. And 2 of those tablets that have been found are fascinating because they contain pretty much exactly the same information, the same names of kings that ruled the world for more than 200,000 years, and they ruled the world before the flood. And these are clearly not humans. They were Anunnaki that were put in charge of this planet. And they tell us very clearly, the Sumerian tablet tells us that when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and kings and priests were appointed among the humans to rule over the humans. So it tells us when these royal bloodlines were initiated and created by the gods of heaven and earth. And that was around the Great Flood. I believe it was just after the flood that we first see the first human bloodlines appear, the priest kings that had knowledge and information, knowledge of alchemy, advanced knowledge, which they were given by the Anunnaki or the gods with which to rule humanity. And boy, have they done that successfully.
Oh, have they ever. Michael, we've got another call here, too. Rascal, just hang on with me for a moment. And James in Massachusetts, you're on Late Night in the Midlands.
How you doing, Michael? Hey, Michael.
All right.
Buddy James, you remember me from saying goodbye to you up in Vermont this past summer.
Hi, Jimmy.
Yeah, how you doing? Keeping in mind with this gold and stuff, I get back on the gold, and you mentioned it yourself that gold is non-magnetic. And I actually asked Marshall Mathers last week about the aluminum, and quoting you, you're saying that the gold is to shield the atmosphere in Nibiru. Nibiru goes flying through the whatever. Do you think that the gold shield is really to prevent electromagnetic shifts from the planet to another planet as it's passing through the solar system? Because it's non-magnetic, right?
Yeah. I think that the shield, this is where sometimes Zechariah Sitchin's translations was the correct translation, but possibly the wrong interpretation of what the true purpose of the action was. I now believe that the so-called shielding of the planet with the monoatomic gold was not necessarily to protect them against cosmic rays and so forth, but it was actually to shield them from the prying eyes of the rest of the conscious, universal beings that were looking at the Anunnaki and what they were doing on planet Earth and reading their minds and understanding that they were actually up to no good on planet Earth. That was shielding the planet from view, so that it was actually invisible and not detectable in the electromagnetic spectrum, and difficult to find, and also to protect their thoughts from being read. Remember that we actually have a capacity to read people's minds and read people's thoughts, so that we are constantly connected to the entire grid of knowledge and information of the universe. So what they were doing on planet Earth was known to the other advanced beings, and they weren't happy with that, because it seems that the Anunnaki do this on many planets. Earth is not the only planet they do this on. They've been doing this on many, many planets throughout the universe, going there, enslaving the people, the beings on that planet, and abusing that planet for its mineral wealth, especially gold. So, yeah, look, this deception runs deep, and the more you get into it, the more you study it, the more mind-blowing revelations it keeps dishing up.
Absolutely. James?
Yep. Thank you, Michael. Say hello to Louise for me, will you? Take it easy. See you this
I will,
summer.
Jimmy.
Bye.
Look after yourself. We'll see you in the US again soon.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for the call, James. I appreciate it. And Ruscala, hang on with me for a moment. And Michael, hang on with me for just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll guest Michael Tillinger. He's going to be with us for just a few more minutes here. And then for the remainder of tonight, Ruscala and I will discuss a few things. So, Michael, we are back. And Ruscala, I'm going to bring you back on because I don't think you were done. I think you had another question.
I was going to ask Michael, with regard to your belief that the Anunnaki are still here and running the planet. From what I understand, they were considerably larger than us. Is that correct?
Yeah, that seems to be the case. The repetitive indicators suggest that they're probably about 9 feet tall.
And I have seen reports now, more reports surfacing where these large skeletons have been found, and they believe that these creatures it looks just like a human skeleton, very similar to a human skeleton, but just on a much larger scale.
Yeah. It's the movie Prometheus is interesting, possibly a parody on what's happening here.
So these skeletons have really been found. It's not just fictional. I mean, I know that there's some people say, "Oh no, those are all Photoshop," but they are really finding these giant skeletons, are they not?
There was a while back where a bunch of the pictures were Photoshopped. What I'm seeing now is that this is real. There are actually people, I don't know if it's called certifying, they're testifying that these these bones are going to legitimate places to be analyzed and looked at.
Yeah. Look, the story of giants in human history is a fascinating one. I mean, that we can talk about that for hours. And the giants have been found around the world for thousands of years, and there's well-documented information and evidence of giants being found. I mean, from people slightly larger than we are, and also tiny people. Klaus Donner shows beautiful examples of tiny people that are like 1.5 feet tall, to giants that are 36 feet tall, that are just insanely large compared to what we are. And then once again, in the Bible it tells us that we look like locusts to them. We were like locusts in their eyes. So that means that there must have been giants that were huge at some stage, beings that were very large. But once again, remember that our education is structured by the banking elite, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies. The education system we have today has got nothing to do with education. It's to prepare human beings to become slave laborers, people that work, go out and find jobs. And what is jobs all about? Jobs is about making money, which keeps the bankers in control and the wheels of industry turning so they can keep mining and keep enslaving humanity. It's a spectacular setup.
It is, and it's been working for them for a long time.
Yeah. So, what I'd like to finish with, I don't know, it looks like we only have a few minutes left. What I'd like to, finish with is to say, what do we do with this knowledge and information? Because it's pointless just, doing research and putting more knowledge and more information on the table. If we can't use that information to our benefit, then it's a wasted exercise. I believe that what this points to is that we've been grossly abused and manipulated as a species. We're coming of age. We are experiencing and a rapid rise in consciousness, realizing that we are infinite beings. We are beings of infinite soul and infinite consciousness, part of the great creation, that God is within us, what all the great prophets told us, right? Just remind us what they've been trying to tell us. God is within you, and you can do everything with your mind. And all that information is encoded in the great works. So we've got to use this information and free ourselves from this slavery that we're in. And the only way we're going to do that is to get rid of the tools that enslave us. And the main tool that enslaves us is money. And this is where my work on contributionism and the ancient African system of Ubuntu becomes very, very prominent and becomes central to what we have to start thinking about and start moving towards. I'm just about to finish my book on Ubuntu contributionism, Blueprint for a New Social Structure, A World Without Money. It is such a beautiful and a simple way of experiencing life, but first we need to release ourselves from the shackles and the poisoned minds that we carry that keep telling us that, we can't survive without money, that money makes the world go around, and all those, that indoctrination that we are all victims of. The moment we get rid of money, everything changes for the better.
Amen.
It's spectacular. Yeah.
Amen. I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now, what do you think that, of all the lessons we can learn, it doesn't appear that we take these lessons to stride, but what can we learn from past civilizations? Obviously, I think one lesson is that, nothing's guaranteed. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And one lesson we can learn is that we've been doing the same thing over and over again for at least 6,000 years. Money is not the consequence of thousands of years of human evolution. Money has not evolved with humanity. Money is not the consequence of barter and trade, as many people wrongfully believe. Money was maliciously introduced by the priest kings around 6,000 years ago to control humanity. It's as simple as that, because the priest kings, as they did in later years, coined the money. And those people who have the right to coin the money will control everyone else. And that continues today. And this is why we can find a link between the royal bloodlines and the banking families of today who have the exclusive rights to coin the money of today. So the only way we're going to free ourselves as a species from this is to get rid of money. And it's a beautiful, simple system. The process I outline in my forthcoming book called Ubuntu Contributionism. It takes a while for some people to get into, wrap your heads around, because we can't replace money with another form of money. We just got to get rid of money completely. We don't need money as a species. It's completely alien to humanity, to our lives. It's alien to our planet. We're the only species that use any kind of thing called money. It's just completely insane that we should be using it. So, the quicker we start thinking about a world without money, the easier it becomes to imagine it. And once we all start imagining it, we can then start accessing what you will know, and many of your listeners will know as the law of attraction, the universal code. The more we start thinking about a world without money, the more we start to make it a reality for ourselves. And it's a beautiful thing.
See, I think the powers that be, I think that they're, obviously we're going to have an economic crash. I mean, it's only a matter of time. And they would like to see a cashless society, but not in the way that we would like. I think they would like to put chips in us all.
Well, of course.
And for further control, yeah.
They're trying everything. So, as we're waking up, we're realizing the control, recognizing how we've been totally enslaved on every possible imaginable level. It's up to us to start spreading this information, telling everyone we need to get rid of money. We need to create beautiful communities where people have abundance on all levels. Remember, the moment you get rid of money, you're moving the hurdle to progress, because it's because of money that people can't do things in their lives. It's because of money that communities can't, build more infrastructure, that they can't do this or can't do that. Not because they don't want to, because there's no money. So if you get rid of money and you replace the money with the people's labor of love, contributing towards their community what they're passionate about or what they are skillful in, you are now not only getting rid of the hurdle to all progress, but you're turning the entire pyramid of hierarchy upside down and creating abundance on every level, because instead of chasing money, people create every step of the way. Everything they do in their lives is creating something towards the benefit of others and themselves. It's such a simple system that it boggles the mind.
Absolutely. Rascala, did you have anything else?
Michael Tellinger, you're an amazing wealth of information, my friend. I hope to hear you again.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you sharing your time and giving me a platform to share some of this with your listeners. I'm doing the best to get my book finished by the end of March so we can get it out as soon as possible, at least in an ebook format, because I believe the time has come. People need to start looking at other options and other alternatives. Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, let's stop this insanity and become sane. Let's find a new system. And the only way to do that is to get rid of money.
I totally agree. Totally.
I do too. We need to kick the bankers right out. Michael, at websites or any other information you'd like to get out, by all means go ahead. And I do appreciate so much you taking time with us tonight, because I know, what is it, 5 something in the morning where you are?
Yeah, it's just gone 6. I've been up since 4 o'clock, or actually before 4 o'clock, because I couldn't sleep. So I was up working on my book actually, and then we got involved in this discussion. So it's just gone 6 o'clock here, and I'm going to go back to bed and sleep a bit. But my website's main one is michaeltillinger.com, and you'll get all the information there, michaeltillinger.com. And also I'll be doing a quick tour of the UK from the 20th of March until the 30th of March. Impromptu visit to the UK, doing about 4 or 5 presentations there. So if you are in the UK area,
schools today, they don't mention any of this. They make it, I mean, I came out of school believing that ancient civilizations were lucky that they were smart enough to be able to hunt their food and eat. And it appears that they were much smarter than that.
Well, exactly. And, all we have to do is look at the ancient structures. And I had this discussion with somebody earlier today that arrived at my little museum and has read my books and was just very happy that I was around to have a chat with me. And we're just talking about the incredibly mind-boggling ancient structures, from the Great Pyramids of Giza to the many other structures around the world that boggle the minds of people. And especially in Peru and in South America, some of those ancient and pre-Inca civilizations, the structures there are just spectacular. And Stonehenge is another example. What I find fascinating is that historians and archaeologists and the people that study this in the sort of mainstream, very narrow, conservative approach, keep pointing out the obvious. Well, here's a structure. It was built by ancient people. Well, everybody can see that there's a structure that was built by ancient people. We can all see that. You're not telling me anything new by telling me that. Now, please tell me how they built this, what your theories are on how they built it and why they built it, and stop applying your current logic that is linked to today's society. Because you cannot use today's logic to explain something that happened from a period before our current understanding of civilization. And that's a problem. We can see these structures standing there. But what our sort of common mainstream media and academia do not tell us is how it was built, why they built it. We keep hearing the same regurgitated nonsense over and over again. Unfortunately, I think people are getting sick and tired of the same stuff that links with so many different aspects, from geological information and evidence and support and information that we can extract from astronomy and archaeology and astrophysics and geophysics, from mythology and from every other area of science, whether it's physics and or even metaphysics. The important thing is that when you start delving into human history and the origins of humankind, you've got to be prepared and have an open mind to go down channels that you may not be familiar with, or many of us are often not prepared to go down those roads because they just seem too weird and too funky. Unfortunately, that's where it starts to cause problems. And it's really exciting because, the information that we extract from these ancient stone structures, the tools and the artifacts that I've been collecting, the information is so astounding that it starts to give us a very clear understanding that these ancient people had an advanced knowledge of technology, the laws of nature that they applied and used in their technology, and astronomy and the earth and the universe and science and physics and everything that we believe we are very smart about. They had a far superior and infinitely superior knowledge, and left behind all this information encoded in these ancient structures and the tools and artifacts that I've been collecting.
Yeah, if you go by what they teach in school, combination of what I
wrote about in Slave Species of God and Slave Species of the Gods. And then the discovery of Adam's calendar, which I called Adam's calendar, that I was introduced to by Johann Heine in 2007. Johann Heine rediscovered this ancient calendar site in about 2003. And he just couldn't get any of the historians, archaeologists, or academics to even come out there and look at the site. They just completely dismissed it offhand. Then I was introduced to it in 2007 and started a path of research and discovery that was just completely mind-boggling and unexpected, that led me to what I believe discovering the links to the Anunnaki presence on Earth. The ancient vanished civilizations of Southern Africa go back to around 300,000 years ago, and pretty much presenting the physical evidence of everything that Zecharia Sitchin has written about and given the world in his life of study and research. So it's really an introduction, I can say, because since Temples of the African Gods, there's been a lot more discovery, and I'm probably going to finish the new book by the end of this year to put all of it in context. But Temples of the African Gods is just about to be re-released with new information and some new chapters under a slightly different title called The African Temples of the Annunaki. That is being released by Bear and Koena Traditions this month around the world. And it presents huge physical and photographic evidence of this vast vanished civilization and gold mining activity that has been sitting here in Southern Africa for so long, and nobody has paid attention to it. It's quite mind-boggling.
I see. So we'll get to the kind of the nuts and bolts on this. I mean, my main question, I guess, is how long has the human race been on this planet? And if you had to take a wild guess, or maybe you know, how did we get here?
Well, it's all starting to unravel and become very more and more clear on a month-to-month and a year-by-year basis. When people like Eric von Däniken released his Chariots of the Gods, it was a big shock to the system. While some people were very new to that, there were many others who felt a great sense of comfort with that kind of information. It made sense to them. And it's astounding that when Chariots of the Gods was first put out by von Däniken, I think it was in the late 50s or early 60s, he put that information out without any genetic and really deeply scientific support. It was really just common sense and common logic, which we often forget about. If it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, the chances are pretty good that it must be a duck. So, let's not call it an ostrich, let's stick with a duck. And that's really what I believe we must always remember and compliment Eric von Däniken on, is to be bold and brave, to use common sense and logic to say, listen, everything we've been taught in history is just one set of ideas and theories. But there are many more ideas and theories if you start looking at things from a different perspective. If you accept that we are just part of the great creation, the great divine creation of infinite proportion, and we're just one tiny little speck of that great infinite creation, then there must be a hell of a lot of stuff going on in the universe. And that is obviously the case for those that have gone down this path and studied that. And what we have here in South Africa is really critical to bring us closer to the understanding of our humanness and our humanity, who we are, where we come from, and why we are here. Those three, what I call the great human puzzle, those three questions that so many of us have contemplated, and yet there's so little, there are so few answers that have come from mainstream academia and mainstream history. It all seems to come out of the areas of independent research. And, you know, it's fascinating because I come from a university where I studied and got my degree, and many other researchers like myself come from established educational institutions with the respective degrees and qualifications. While the moment you leave that institution, you're no longer seen as part of that institution or having any kind of credentials to be able to say things. So I find it interesting that for people like myself and many thousands of others who come from these academic institutions, the moment you start putting down your own theories, something that is different to what we are taught in these academic institutions, you're no longer seen as an expert or you know, someone who has the right to give an opinion because you're not part of these institutions. It's crazy, you know? So what we have here is physical and scientific evidence